Good morning. The Adams County Board of County Commissioners is now in session. It is Tuesday, May 15th, 9:30 a.m. Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Hodge.
Here.
Commissioner Tedesco.
Here.
Commissioner Henry.
Here.
Commissioner Odorizio. Here. Commissioner Hanson.
Here.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would now entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Commissioner Henry.
Yes.
Commissioner Odorizio. Yes. Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Tedesco.
Yes.
Commissioner Hodge.
Aye. We begin this morning deeply saddened by the loss of our friend, our colleague, and our partner, Aurora Mayor Steve Hogan. Under Mayor Hogan's leadership and more than 3 decades of service, Aurora blossomed into a model of diversity, inclusivity, and sustainable growth. We offer our deepest condolences to the Hogan family, the employees, and the residents of the city of Aurora. Steve Hogan will be missed. At this time, would you please join me in a moment of silence in honor of Mayor Hogan? Thank you. Any comments from any commissioners? Stories, comments? Commissioner Tedesco.
I just want to say I only knew Mayor Hogan for the last, well, since 2012. Mayor Hogan has kind of been my mentor and friend and confidant. We've done a lot of work in Adams County. We were successful with the Gaylord. We've been successful with the DIA negotiations and the property there. We've been very successful on some of the other, things that we've worked on, like the RTA for Aurora Highlands. I will miss him. He's very special, and he's very special to Adams County and Aurora. And he will forever be remembered for the things that he's been able to accomplish in his life. I sat on E-470, and he was instrumental in my becoming an officer on E-470. You just can't find people like that very often, and I'll miss him, and I hope that everybody will remember him. He's done a lot of great things. Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson.
I know Steve for, I don't know, long time. I don't even remember, more than 10 years. We're both mayors, and both had cancer. I fortunately survived mine. There's too many people that I've known lately that have been diagnosed with that terrible disease. Our county manager, Barry Gore, other people that work here at the county, Steve Hogan. It's just awful. It's awful when anyone passes away. It's awful when you have that kind of loss that you're going to have in terms of leadership. People don't realize how long he has been around. He had been around starting as a state representative back in the 70s. And the funny story about him, I remember asking him about this one time, but there was a congressman that got elected in 1980 who was on the Apollo 13 mission, who passed away of cancer, and was elected but never served office. His opponent in that election was Steve Hogan. That's how long ago that was. A little bit ironic that he passed away of cancer as well as that astronaut did back in, I think, 1980 or 81. And it's just a terrible disease in terms of how it affects people and how quickly it can take people. I learned a lot from Steve. I remember I had a conversation with him probably about a year or two ago, and I was thinking about, you know, what my personal future might be like, and I'm like, geez, Steve, I said, you've been in this game for like 30+ years. How the hell do you do that? He's like, yeah, I took breaks. And he did. Actually, I think I met him during one of those times when he was not actually in elected office, but was the director of the Northwest Parkway, because, you know, he ran E470 as well, and then after that, they named him as the first executive director and CEO of the Northwest Parkway. This is before he was then reelected at one point to office in Aurora. And I think that's probably a good thing to keep in mind. You know, he has been one of those people that has been, I think, steadfast for a really long time. And it's easy to get cynical when you do this job over that period of time, particularly when you saw the things that he saw, you know, with the Aurora theater shooting, and just the kind of growth that you saw in the city of Aurora. You know, getting elected and not being named Tower, for example, you know, was a big deal in Aurora. People don't even remember. They don't even know what I'm talking about. It's amazing. But Steve was a friend, and I learned a lot from him, and I really appreciated his leadership, and he will be missed.
Further comment? Commissioner O'Dorisio.
I did not know Steve as long as the other two folks on the panel here that have spoke, but I can tell you that what I did see from him in my short period of time of interacting with him is that he knew how to stand up for his community in a professional manner, and do so in a way that shows that we can interact and vigorously fight for your community, but do it in a way that's professional and respectful. And I feel like that is something that I'm personally going to take away, is that in this ugly world of politics and policy making, there are ways to do it and be effective and professional and respectful. And that's what I am taking away from my experience with him.
Commissioner Henry.
I just want to send out my condolences to his family. We sometimes forget that our politicians have families that love us and care for us, and I know Steve's family really does, and he will definitely be missed, not only by his family, but by his friends. So I would definitely want to send out my condolences for them.
Thank you. I've been trying to find the quote. The editor of the Aurora Sentinel said it best. He said something to the effect, and I haven't found the quote exactly, that Steve never had to get out in front and be goofy at the head of the parade. He stepped aside and let other people walk through. Steve was I've known him longer, apparently, than anybody on this panel. I knew him when he was a Democrat. So anyway, my condolences to the family also. A celebration of life ceremony is being planned, and we will share the details of that on our website once it's been released. So with that, public comment. Do we have anyone signed up?
We do not.
Okay. Commissioner comments? I would then entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the consent calendar, which includes items A through J.
Second.
Commissioner O'Dorisio?
Yes.
Commissioner Henry?
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson?
Right.
Commissioner Tedesco?
Yes.
Commissioner Hodge?
Aye. New business, county manager.
Well, good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for giving a wonderful tribute to Mayor Hogan and his family. The first and only item is a resolution approving a purchase order between Adams County and Insight Public Sector, Inc. for our annual Microsoft Office 365 licenses and support. And our Director of ITI, Kevin Beach, has made a commitment to present this item in less than 36.5 seconds, so.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is our annual maintenance for all things Microsoft. I know in the subject it says our Office license, but it also includes everything Microsoft. So Visio, SQL, Microsoft project, a lot of items. It's worth noting about 100,000 of this bill is for the sheriff's office as well. Any questions?
Any questions? Is there a motion? Commissioner?
Make a motion to approve the resolution purchase order between Adams County and Insight Public Sector, Inc. for the annual Microsoft Office 365 license and support.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Tedesco?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Dorisio?
Yes.
Commissioner Henry?
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hodge?
Aye. We will now break for a few minutes while we set up for land use hearings. We are back for land use hearings. Emily Collins, would you like to proceed?
Thank you, Commissioners. The first case before you this morning is the Dollar General, which is a request to rezone a parcel of land from Agriculture 3 to Commercial 4 for future development. So the site is located and outlined in the light blue. It's on the east side of Monroe and on the north side of Colfax Avenue. So we are in the Strasburg area here, so you can see where the schools are in relation to this site. They're to the northwest. So in a larger context, this is about 30 miles from DIA, 15 miles from Watkins, and about 10 miles from Bennett. So this site is on the farthest eastern portion of the commercial corridor along Colfax Avenue. So when looking at the site, this is an older aerial image, but it is vacant. There were previous uses that had been in violation and were since cleaned up. It is next to some existing residential development to the northwest, but primarily all of the other uses along Highway 36 are commercial. Interesting to note on this site and adjacent to this area is the floodway and floodplain. So a portion of this site will be undeveloped with any structures because of the floodway. And then when looking at the context of this rezoning and the potential for development in this area, due to that floodway and floodplain, those areas would be extremely limited or restricted from other development. So this parcel and the request to rezone it really is somewhat of a bookend to the commercial corridor on Highway 36 for Strasburg. The future land use designation of this site is urban residential, and the goals of our comprehensive plan are to support a variety of housing types, but in addition to that, this future land use designation does support neighborhood serving retail uses. So the request to rezone is therefore compatible with the goals of our comprehensive plan to provide those supporting services to the existing and future residents of this area. And as you can see by the future land use map, primarily all of the other uses along Highway 36 are designated as commercial. So again, this request and the proposed development would be compatible with the surrounding area. We have 4 criteria for review and approval of a rezoning request. Those are consistency with our comprehensive plan, which we have reviewed, as well as consistency with our development standards and the request being harmonious and compatible with the surrounding area. So staff performed some analysis of this area in Strasburg, the adjacent uses, our comprehensive plan, and the proposed development, and found that commercial and service uses would support the growing community in Strasburg. As I'm sure you're aware, there are several new subdivision plats that have been approved recently and are also currently under review that will be coming before the board. So this area will definitely be growing in population and therefore requires additional commercial uses to support those residents. In addition, it's adjacent to existing commercial uses on Colfax, and again, Colfax Avenue does serve as that main commercial district for Strasburg. It's also a primary arterial, so it can support the additional traffic that would be associated with new commercial uses, and is therefore appropriate for that type of development instead of putting that commercial use farther into the residential area in Strasburg. In addition, during development, staff would review any landscape buffers, screen fencing, or other access requirements that would be associated with the specific project, and that would ensure compatibility with the nearby residential areas. So again, when looking at our existing zoning map, the property is zoned A3. So there are A3 and A1 parcels to the north and to the east, and those are intended for single-family residential and primarily either food production or agricultural related uses. But when you look to the other side, looking west, you do have primarily those single-family residences or the commercial uses, and those residential areas would, again, utilize the commercial development for their needs. And if the zoning map were to be amended, that is what it would look like. So again, somewhat of a strong bookend to that commercial corridor, because all of the properties to the east that are zoned agricultural are, again, in either the floodway or the floodplain. So development on those properties would be more challenging or limited because of those uses. So C4 again is retail, so it would support any of those general needs that the community may have. When looking at the C4 standards to ensure compatibility and compliance, there are no dimensional requirements for a minimum lot size, but there is a minimum lot width of 100 feet, and this property exceeds that at 175 feet, so it does comply with our C4 development standards. And this is a conceptual site plan submitted by the applicant. Again, the name of this is the Dollar General rezoning, so that is the proposed development at this time. So they've provided a very conceptual plan that would show access off of Colfax with the associated parking, a building footprint located on the western edge, and then primarily to the north would be their detention and landscape buffers, and that's also where the nearest residential uses would be. So landscape buffers would be compatible with those uses adjacent on that end of the property. So again, this is conceptual and may change at time of building permit, but staff would be reviewing for lighting, parking, landscaping, et cetera. So this is from Colfax Avenue looking north into the property. So again, there were several other uses that had previously been located on the site. They will all be removed for future development. It is unimproved at this time. And this is looking farther north into the property, so again, this would be the general location of very likely any on-site drainage features because of the floodway, which would restrict buildings being placed there. And then you can see the residential areas that border it. This is looking west on Colfax. So directly adjacent to this site, there is an automotive service use, and then on the other side, west of Monroe, there's a car wash. So again, you can see that there are many commercial uses existing looking west. But when you look east, there are really no other development at this time. And then looking south, existing agricultural uses. And this is from Monroe Street, so this is looking east towards the property. So again, you may see some buildings back here, but landscape buffers would be required to screen in between those uses. During the referral, no major concerns were noted from the fire districts, CDOT, Tri-County, or Excel. And development review has noted for the applicant that public improvements and right-of-way dedication may be required during their building permit. When notifying property owners and residents within 750 feet of the site, we did not receive any comments on this request. So in addition to just the normal property owner notices, staff sent an additional notification to all residents in this buffer area. Planning Commission heard this request on April 26th and recommended unanimous approval. Planning Commission did ask the applicant to discuss their availability of water, sewer, and gas. And they also asked staff the intensity of uses that may be permitted in the C4 zone district. Again, primarily this is a commercial corridor, and those uses would be allowed, but anything of the heavier retail, like certain automotive storage or repair uses, commercial outdoor recreation, those would all require a conditional use permit, and that would come before this board for approval. There was no public testimony provided at this hearing. And so again, just to summarize the four criteria, the proposed request is consistent with our comprehensive plan, the surrounding area, and our development standards. And so staff and Planning Commission do recommend approval. And sorry, that is not the Denver Mart Logan Street. This is the Dollar General request, but we do recommend approval with 4 findings of fact. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Okay. Would the applicant like to present?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Griffin Bryant. I work for Vaquero Ventures, which is the real estate developer for this project. We're actually the real estate developer for Dollar General in Colorado. We're currently under contract for this property, and should the Board of Commissioners decide to grant us this rezone, we will close on the property within the week. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Has anyone signed up from the public to testify on this?
No.
Is there anyone in the audience that wants to talk about this? Seeing none, do I have a motion? Commissioner.
Madam Chair, I move for the passage of RCU 18-2, Dollar General, with, for approval with 4 findings of fact.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner O'Dorisio,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Tedesco,
Yes.
Commissioner Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Hodge.
Aye. Okay.
Good morning,
Thank you,
Commissioners. Greg Barnes with the Community Economic Development Department. I will have two cases before you that are very similar. Both are applications by Crown Castle for renewals of conditional use permits for telecommunications towers. The first of these two cases is located at 5550 Sheridan Boulevard, and this request is located within the I-2 Industrial 2 Zone District. A little background on this tower: it was granted approval in 1997 and later constructed for 10-year approval with the conditional use permit at that time. In November of 2007, an additional 10-year approval was granted, and the applicant is before you today seeking another 10 years. The subject property is located here in the center of the screen. It's an elongated property going from east to west, and it's located in between Tennyson Street and Sheridan Boulevard, just north of I-76. The subject property is zoned I-2, and most of the surrounding properties are also zoned I-2. Just to the west is a small property which is zoned A1, and it is separated from other zone districts by the interstate by a very large right-of-way. The county's comprehensive plan has designated a future land use on this property of mixed-use employment. Mixed-use employment is intended to be clean industrial uses that support employment. There is a parcel which is located to the northwest that is designated as commercial. The criteria for evaluating a conditional use permit includes whether the use can be permitted in the zone district, if the use is consistent with the purpose of the regulations as well as complying with the performance standards for the use, if the request is harmonious and compatible to the general area and has addressed any off-site impacts, if the site itself is suitable for the use and the site plan is adequate spacing, as well as whether the services can be provided to support the use. So this is an aerial photo of the property. Just to the north is an access road which connects to Sheridan Boulevard to the west, and the tower location would be located in the southwest corner of this parcel. There's a concrete batch operation which is located on the industrial property, and so the tower is an accessory use to that. It's located just to the north of the banks of Clear Creek. And so this is an overview. It's kind of hard to read, but Sheridan is off to the west. The access road comes off of Sheridan along the north side of the property, and the tower location would be just north of Clear Creek and I-76, located here. And this is a zoomed-in version of their lease area. Their lease area actually includes a mature canopy tree. It's deciduous, and the applicant is proposing to fence the area with a vinyl fence, which would be 6 feet in height and sort of a forest green in color. And this is an elevation of what the fence would look like. The applicant is proposing the fence because upon application, staff visited the site and noticed that in the last 20 years the fence had deteriorated, and so staff requested a new fence. This is an image of the site. The applicant has already demolished the old fence that was dilapidated. As you can see, the tower location is here, and there's the mature tree that's located within the lease area. Off in the distance, you can see several other trees that are located along Clear Creek, which help to buffer from the interstate. Another image to show you what the equipment shelter would look like on the site. This is the access road looking to the west toward the concrete batch operations. During the referral period, staff notified all property owners within 1,000 feet of the property, which 19 notices were mailed. At a later date, we also notified all residents with addresses in the area. During the referral period, no referral agencies commented opposition of this request. And so in light of the criteria for a conditional use permit, staff has determined that this use is appropriate in the zone district. The existing landscaping helps to shield the tower's view from the interstate, and the improved fencing will better comply with the standards. So therefore, staff is recommending approval of this conditional use permit with 8 findings of fact and 5 conditions, and I do have those conditions available if you'd like to review them. Thank you.
Any questions? Commissioner Tedesco.
So I'm just confused because I appreciate the fact we're trying to be, you know, consistent across the board with, you know, fencing and shielding of these operations, but I-76 sits so far above this, is you're not looking into it, you're not looking at it, you're looking into it, kind of like a bowl, right? And the pictures that I saw had the trees pretty much as a buffer between this facility and the tower, right? And then the road itself, it's not a public thoroughfare, it's a private drive for the concrete company, am I not correct?
The access road is private. It would not have a great deal of public visibility. There was an existing dilapidated fence that definitely needed repair, and so rather than not have a fence at all, staff recommended that the fence be replaced, but.
Okay, I'm not trying to change anything, I'm just trying to understand it because, I mean, is this, we're doing it because we just want to be consistent across the board with all the others, or?
I do believe we want to be consistent. I also believe, and maybe the applicant can speak to this, that they may want some level of security around their equipment shoulder as well.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Does the applicant want to comment?
Good morning, Madam Commissioner and members of the board. Mark McGarry is my name with Crown Castle, 3308 Birch Road in Longmont. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning and follow up on Greg's report. But first, just a thank you to staff. Crown is one of the largest infrastructure providers to the wireless industry, and so we acquire towers over time with the intent to own and manage these facilities in the long term. And what we find over time is, as we acquire these assets that have been developed by the tower or the phone companies over the years, is that they need up to date, they need to be upgraded, they need to be continually maintained, and obviously need to be correctly permitted. So we appreciate the opportunity to do what we can incrementally to continue to improve these facilities. There's certainly going to be the need for them in the long term, and we anticipate this site being here as well as the others we'll talk about for many years to come. So as we work with staff and assess kind of changing conditions on the property, changing conditions in the code, we're always looking for opportunities that we can work with the community to improve these where we can, understanding most folks are accustomed to these towers now. Everybody understands the importance of their connectivity. And so we see there's a lot of support for these facilities, but we do understand they're not pretty to look at, and land use conditions change over time. So we really want to try to do what we can, where we can, to incrementally improve them. And in this condition, in this case, the fencing we feel like is a reasonable thing to do in terms of visual improvements. And while I certainly agree with you, I don't think there's a lot of visibility to this facility from the freeway. You know, over time, what we don't know is what's going to happen to this property or adjacent properties. So it's certainly something we're willing to do and happy to do, realizing we don't understand, you know, we don't have a crystal ball and see where we are in the future in terms of land use. We certainly look at the opportunity to improve and take that seriously. So I think that's kind of how we're approaching the fencing in this situation. There'll probably be a couple of others we'll be talking about in the future where we may not agree with some of staff conditions and recommendations relative to screening, but we're always going to look at those on a case-by-case basis and do the best we can to comply with all of the conditions that you all want to see us work with. So with that, I'll answer any questions if I can. I appreciate your help.
Questions? Commissioner Odericio.
So why would we not do one of the facades on the actual tower itself like you can do elsewhere to make it look like a clock tower or a tree or something along those lines? I mean, we're trying to improve the aesthetics along the corridor of I-76, and it feels like we're not doing that here.
Sure. Well, it's certainly consideration. We look at that. It wouldn't be something that we would want to drive. We would allow, you know, staff recommendation and this board's recommendation to drive that. It's really a significant cost, obviously, to do that. What we want to look at is what's the impact of the tower realistically on surrounding land uses and surrounding property owners. In this case, because it is industrial, because we have significant buffer from residential, and I think what we'd find in your code today, if you were to build a new tower in industrial, probably a stealth tower would not be a requirement in this land use designation. So we kind of look at that as the guide. I think we're willing to do that where it's appropriate, and I think in this situation we'd say, this is probably one of those as an industrial use in an industrial lot that doesn't have significant impacts to residential, where we would suggest that it's probably not the best thing based on a cost benefit from our perspective.
Go ahead.
And so I disagree, because this is still along I-76 and the trail window into our community, and I would like to see it have that facade.
Further questions? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to talk to this? Okay, Commissioner O'Dorisio.
So back to my question, are you willing to make any change?
We're certainly willing to do anything that we need to do to keep this facility viable here. I would ask perhaps we could get some input from staff on what the code requirements in industrial are for new towers. What we don't want to do is set a precedent that every single tower in Adams County is going to come down when we need a new permit without a consideration of what those actual offsite impacts are here. I'm of the opinion personally that this site, given its industrial nature, is adequate as a tower. If that's your stipulation, then we'll take that back to Crown and we'll put something different up. Those costs are significant to us. It also has potentially the impact to change the loading dynamic for future users on the tower, and that's something else we'd have to consider. We've not got into those details yet, and it wasn't a consideration until this point. So it's something we'd want to analyze. At this location, I would suggest probably a bell tower would not maybe be the best option for you. What we want to do is obviously blend into what the surrounding structures look like, what the surrounding vegetation looks like. It's possible a tree at this location might be adequate given the surroundings, but even in that situation, I think it's going to be difficult to see. What I like to do with pine trees in particular is use those in locations where you've got a forest that you can blend that site in with. This industrial property doesn't lend itself to that. While there are some deciduous trees around this site, and as Greg pointed out, there's a tree right in the middle of this lease compound, an artificial tree in that location is probably going to do more to make it stand out than to hide it, in my opinion. So it's not always easy to do. I think the other thing we'd probably end up doing is lose that nice tree. If we have to expand that structure, that deciduous tree is probably going to have to come out of there. So it raises some other issues, and while I appreciate your intent to try to get that done, it poses a lot of challenges for us.
Go ahead.
Question for staff. Do we know what's going to happen with the rest of this site in the near future, or do we have any indication that it's likely to change?
We don't anticipate that it's likely to change in the term of this lease. This is not an area where we are seeing as much development interest as we are over in the federal corridor along Clear Creek. And I think Greg would add to this probably, but we did analyze this point during the case review and found that the existing tree provides, quite frankly, pretty adequate screening from the trail system. And preserving that tree, I think, would be far more important than replacing the tower with a stealth design. That's the staff's input, and that was certainly looked at by Greg and others in our department during the review of the case. And that tree, when it's, when it has leaves on it, it really does screen this facility quite well.
So
Go ahead.
I'm okay with that explanation. And because of that tree, is there a requirement that if that tree dies that you would replace it? It would take a long time to grow to that size, but
That could certainly
as
be
part of the
a condition.
landscape requirement, would that be fair?
I think that'd be
I'll go-
reasonable, sure.
I'll go with that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. And you're right, putting a big green tree in the middle of this might look a little conspicuous, so. I'm okay with it as is recommended, and if you'd like to add if this tree is removed or dies or something, that it would be replaced with one that eventually will grow.
I would note that Crown Castle submitted 4 applications on 4 different sites. At the same time, I visited all 4 sites, and this was the one site that I actually had trouble finding the tower.
That's
It was
good.
the most hidden of the 4, so.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Is there a motion?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner?
I move that RCU 2017-00014, Crown Castle 1, be approved as read with the addition of the replacing of the tree. So that would be with 8 findings of fact and 6 conditions? I'm
Okay.
looking at staff for,
Well, he was, yes.
okay.
I'll second that. And then just a note, it's replacing the tree if this one dies or is removed. Yeah, so I second that.
Commissioner Tedesco,
Yes.
Commissioner Odoracio,
Yes.
Commissioner Henry,
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
So the next case was also submitted by Crown Castle for the renewal of a conditional use permit for a telecommunications tower. This particular property is located at 6245 East 88th Avenue, and this property is located within the I-1 zone district. Much like the last case, this original tower was approved in 1997. This tower was given a 5-year approval. It was renewed for an additional 5 years in 2002, and this board renewed that conditional use permit in 2007 for an additional 10 years. So this is the site. I-76 runs sort of diagonally through the area. The 88th Avenue exit is just to the north and east of this particular site. The site's located here. And it has frontage along what is called East 88th Avenue, but it sort of dead ends into the frontage road. 88th Avenue was redirected to the north to provide access to the interstate. The property is zoned I-1, and it is completely surrounded on the east, west, and north by C5 zoning. Located to the south is I-2 zoning. And the Adams County Comprehensive Plan has designated a future land use of commercial in the larger neighborhood, and it is surrounded by an industrial designation around it. I will not go over the criteria again, because I'm sure you remember it, but it's available if you would like me to go over it. So this is an aerial photo of the site. As I mentioned, the property has frontage on what's called East 88th Avenue. There's actually 3 buildings located within an industrial park. You might recognize this building, which is just located to the south and east. It's an abandoned service station, a large A-frame structure that you can see pretty prominently from the interstate. The overall site plan is here. As I mentioned, there's 3 buildings. And the tower, which is existing, is located behind one of the structures on the property. 88th Avenue is here, and the interstate is located off to the east. The tower would be located 54 feet from the closest corner where that A-frame structure is located. The lease area actually has 2 pieces. This is the building location, and just behind the building is the actual tower location, and then the equipment shelter is located just to the east of that. And much like the last case, there was an existing chain link fence that had started to rust and was 20 years old. And so by request of the staff, the applicant is proposing a new vinyl fence. It's 8 feet tall in height. It will be 4-screen in color as well. So this is an image from 88th Avenue along the frontage of the property. As I mentioned, there are 3 buildings with parking in the middle, and the tower location just peaks above the easternmost building. This is from behind the building, looking toward Frontage Road and the interstate off into the distance. And this is from Frontage Road, sort of on the west side of Frontage Road, close to the interstate. And you can see the tower location. There are a row of mature trees along this frontage, which help provide screening to this site as well. During the referral period, we notified 24 property owners within 750 feet. We also sent an additional mailing to all residents within this district. During the referral period, Commerce City was involved in terms of helping select the new fence style, and they were supportive of the new fence and the color. There were no other referral agencies who offered any input on this case. And so in response to the criteria for approval, staff has determined that this site does meet that criteria, and therefore we're recommending approval of this request with 8 findings of fact and 5 conditions. Thank you.
Questions? Comments? The applicant wish to speak?
Nothing to add, but we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the applicant? Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone in the audience need to comment on this? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner
I move that RCU 2017-00016, Crown Castle 3, be approved as read, with 8 findings of fact and 5 conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Tedesco,
Yes.
Commissioner Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Odorizio, Commissioner Hanson, Commissioner Hodge.
Aye. Okay, seeing nothing more before the board, we are adjourned.